Okay, so at this stage, we're going to make a net for our packaging for our keyring. And what you'll need is a piece of paper, a grid paper, that you can then draw the net onto. So you're going to use the keyring that you've made as a template. So if you place the keyring on the grid paper and then draw like some dots for each corner of how big you want the box to be, so it'll fit in. So I've just decided that I need it to be that wide, and then I want it to be square, so I'm just then counting it across. So however many far it is across from here, I'm then counting down the same number and putting a dot, and then the same distance across and putting a dot. Okay, so this is going to be the base or the lid of the packaging. Okay, now I need to decide on how deep the box needs to be. So I'm using the ring as an idea of how deep it needs to be. So you can see I'm placing the ring in that position between there and there. I've decided it needs to be however many high, and then count the same number across on the other side of the box. So this is going to be one of the sides of the box. And then I'm counted the same number of sides there for how high up I want it to be on this side. So it's going to have obviously 4 sides for a box. So, and same here, count up the same number of sides, same number of dots up as was previously done. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up. And again, just square it off. So I've got my 3 sides so far, and then do the same. So it's 7 dots up. So it looks almost like a cross shape. Now I've missed this line here for some reason. Yeah, I could probably go back and draw it. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to draw some tabs. Now the tabs here are 2 spaces up and 1 in. So you come at an angle, and then it doesn't have to be, it could be 1 up, but just there's enough space to be able to glue. So this section, when it's folded, will glue to this side, and I put a tab on here. You don't need to put them, so a tab wouldn't need to go there and there. It just goes on one to connect to the other. Just brought it in a little bit. Doesn't necessarily hugely matter the exact dimensions of the tab, just as long as there's enough of a space to glue, and you always angle it in from the edge so it doesn't get in the way when you fold the other piece over. So you can see there is the first box, so those bits will glue to each side. So now the way the box is going to work is this box, I'm going to do 2 of these, but the one here is going to be slightly smaller than this one, and they're just going to slot into each other. So the only thing that needs to be smaller, everything can be the same apart from the dimensions of the internal square. So it just needs to be 1 space in and 1 space across. So you can see if you follow this line up, it's just 1 in from here. Okay, so again, so this one was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and this one will be 10 across and 10 deep. So that was 11 by 11, and this one will be 10 by 10. Now the sides can be exactly the same height, so they can be 7 again. So this will be 7 by 7 by 7, because that doesn't make any difference in terms of, in fact, it looks better if it's exactly the same depth. And hopefully the fact it's smaller by 1 grid space should be enough room then to slot one over the other. Okay, and you carry on then doing exactly the same thing. Let's fast forward this bit. Okay, now you cut them all out. Just be wary you don't cut anything off, just cut right round the whole shape. And just carefully cut out the sections for the tabs. Okay, so they both cut out then, ready to connect to some cardboard of some kind for the design. Okay, so at this stage, I've got my 2 nets and I've got some cardboard. Now I've just used, it's about 3mm thick cardboard. what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the nets onto the cardboard. I'm going to do them right on the very edge to make it easier then to cut out afterwards. So I don't have to cut certain sides. So do make sure you use quite a bit of glue. One of the things that I found would have been useful was to let the glue dry properly before starting to cut it out or score later. So what you can do is once you put the glue on, if you want to, you can actually dry the glue. We'll leave it to dry for a little while before you start continuing with the making process. If you want to speed up the process, just a little bit of heat will speed up the drying process. So just like a dryer of some kind, or leave it by the radiator if you want to speed it up a bit. So you can see position this perfectly along the edge. Just so you don't have to then cut this edge or that edge. It's all ready, but just do the next bit. Make sure it's pushed down firmly so it doesn't move around. And then repeat on the other one. And again, you'll see if I push it tight up against this line, I only have to make one cut then through, rather than having to make two cuts. So again, I've got it nice and tight up against this edge to speed up the process. So the next thing I need is a cutting mat, a metal ruler, and a craft knife. Okay, now the craft knife doesn't need to be out too far, probably no more than 2 lines out. And there's also a locking function just at the bottom which you can pull down and it locks and starts moving around. Okay, now I tend to do 3 passes of the knife on each line. So it's 1, 2, and 3. And what happens is, because there's 3 layers of paper, there's 1 at the top, there's 1 in the middle, which is like corrugated, and there's 1 at the bottom. By doing 3 cuts, it should cut through all of those. You've just got to be careful you don't pull it too much, otherwise you end up pulling your paper off. And that's, I should have left this to dry a little bit longer. You can see the paper slightly pulling off here, and if it was dry, it wouldn't do that. So you try and leave the glue to dry a little bit before you start cutting the pieces to size. Okay, and then just repeat. It's just nice 3 cuts for each little bit. Take your time. You don't need to be really, you don't need to force it. That's why you do 3 cuts, because if you force it, then you end up pulling the card and making a mess of it. So carefully cutting away. Hopefully it should come off. Okay, so there are my 2 pieces then cut to size. Okay, so at this stage, I'm going to score the lines to then fold. Now, you've got 2 choices really. You can either use the back of a pair of scissors, like when the scissors aren't open, and run it along the length, or if you just do one very careful cut, just so you cut through the first piece of card, you can actually then cut. You just got to be careful you don't cut all the way through. So it's just a very gentle score with the knife just to break that first layer of paper, and then it tends to be quite a nice then fold. So I've just broken the first layer of paper, and actually it's the second layer of paper that then will hold it in place. You see, you fold it against where you've cut, leaving the cardboard open. Just be really gentle at this stage to make sure you don't cut through any of the bits that you want to keep. Now, at this bit, I'm pushing the flaps flat. So you can push them down with the ruler just on the flaps, because it'll then be easier then to glue it down. If the flaps are quite thick, then it'll be harder to get it set up. So you push them flat with the ruler, you just bring it along, and it should just then flatten those. Now I'm using a glue gun because I want it to dry and set quickly, so I don't have to then spend ages holding it in position. So you're just very, very careful. Make sure you don't get any glue on your fingers, otherwise it does hurt. So apply some glue to the tab, carefully then line it up, and then hold it firmly for about 10 seconds to make sure that the glue is fully dried. And just run it along. Just be really careful of the hot glue. It does hurt if it gets on your skin, so just be really careful what you're doing. Just line it up before you put the glue on. And repeat on the other sides. Okay, so now repeat exactly the same thing on the other one. So exactly the same, just carefully scoring the lines, making sure not to go all the way through. And you push down the tabs with the ruler to make sure they're flat. And you just then glue the tabs into position. And hopefully one should be fractionally smaller than the other one, and they should then slot together like so. Give it a nice, almost like little box, one fitting inside the other like that. At this stage, I'm now going to draw the graphics for the design that's going to go on top, just so it's clear what's in the box. So it's just some advertising on top. Now, let me just make sure. So what I've done is I'm going to measure the distance from one side of the box to the other. And I'm just going to do the graphics on the top face, just some really simple graphics. So measure the distance, put a dot. So you always put a dot in two places. So it's distance from there to there, and then you line up your two dots with your ruler. And do exactly the same thing on the other side. So it's two dots for your distance of your box. Okay, I always use the edge of the piece of paper because that's already a straight edge. There's no point, if I don't have to cut it, I won't go into. I'm now going to draw the design onto the piece of paper. You could print it out if you wanted to. You could photograph it and put a little picture of it there. Or however you wanted to do it. You could do the graphics on the computer instead. But I decided to draw mine out. So I'm doing a little bit of the name of whatever the product is. Draw it all out. There's the price, telling you what the product is. If you wanted to do a bit of graphics underneath, you could put the barcode and recycle afterwards, after it's finished with. And there you go, just glue it on into position. Now I'm going to start adding a bit of a colour to make it stand out. Hopefully people notice it a bit more. So I'm using some felt tips because they're nice and bright. And I'm just going to do the colours of the design. I'm using contrasting colours here, and then obviously the colours of the American football keyring. So it's a red, blue, and white design. And I'm just finishing it off with a fine liner just to make the writing stand out and go around the outside. Okay, thank you for watching.